Hello everyone, I'm Sugary Sweet, and I have a double feature for you today. It is Battles 4 and 5 of my Shining Force 3 Scenario 1 Insane Mode Efficiency playthrough. So a lot has actually happened since the end of the last chapter, so hopefully I can get you all caught up. First, you might be wondering where we even are. After the last map, Symbios and his force entered the town of Balsamo, while a fellow Republic General Varlant acted as a decoy so that King Benetram and Symbios' forces can both try to find the imposter and get away from the Imperial forces that are chasing them. So Symbios and his team confront the Bolsum sect, who has been behind this whole conspiracy, and it turns out they kind of led the entire force into Balsamo on purpose, basically as a trap, because basically since the real King Benetram is traveling with Symbios, people can attest to the fact that he fled the same direction that people saw the kidnapped Emperor being transported in as well. And with the Bolsum sect making a quick getaway, it basically looks like the Republic forces have been caught red-handed. And to make things even worse, General Varlant, who has been trying to stall for time, is getting served pretty badly by the Imperial General Spirial. So Symbios and forces were trapped in Balsamo for a little bit. So during the forces' time in the town, where they bought a couple ranged weapons as alternate options, one of which you'll soon be seeing Dantaris throwing. Mascarin had a huge craving for sweets, so she raided an entire beehive, and it increased her MP by 4 points. So now she's not going to have any more MP issues for a large portion of the game. Meanwhile, Symbios was feeling so depressed that he fell back into his alcoholism, and he downed an entire bottle of power wine, and even though it wasn't very becoming for the leader of this army, it somehow increased his attack power by 4, so now he's a really strong unit. So with the preparations complete, the force was actually able to find a secret passage out of the town of Balsamo. With the help of a Republic soldier who just happened to also be in Balsamo, he kind of got separated from his unit, and you might have noticed that he has actually joined our forces. Albright is a warrior and he uses axes, so that helps us complete the portion of the weapon triangle that we didn't have covered. And even though Albright's starting stats are pretty good, he has the same amount of attack pretty much as both Dantaris and Hayward, and he's also bulkier than Hayward. He's obviously going to be behind on building friendships, so he's not going to get the attack bonus from Symbios if he had a friendship built up with him. And even though Dantaris and Symbios were both able to pick up a tune range option in town, Albright's not going to have that option for tumor maps. And there's also actually not going to be any lance-wielding enemy units for another 3 maps. So even though it might seem like it's nice to get an X-wielder, Albright's kind of working with a handicap because he starts off a little bit behind already, and the devs weren't nice enough to him to provide a solid amount of enemies that he was able to hit effectively for quite a few maps, and that's going to make him fall behind even more. Nevertheless, it's going to be kind of important for us to be using Albright as much as we can. In particular, I do want him to build a level 1 friendship with Symbios as soon as I can. I don't think I truly need it for at least like 5 or 6 more maps, but getting it sooner is obviously going to be more helpful than getting it later because it'll be helpful for Albright, just for him to be able to deal some damage. And like I said, in 2 more maps, he is going to get a 2-range weapon, and that will make it easier for him to be able to get the attack bonus from Symbios. So I guess I haven't really talked about this particular map that much yet. You can see that Dantaris is kind of charging off on his own, and right now he's throwing his new 2-range weapon at this worm. These worms hit really, really hard, and they also have a paralyzed attack. Paralysis in this game is very, very annoying. I don't know the exact rates, but I think it's like a 25 to 50% chance that it'll just totally paralyze you when you try to do any sort of action, which is attack or use an item. But thankfully it doesn't affect movement at all, so you can move around the map as much as you want, and that's really all I need. So even if he had paralyzed me here, it wouldn't have mattered that much. It would have meant that Dantaris would have a lower success rate at throwing his spear at the bat. So to explain what Dantaris is doing here, this is actually an arrive map. You don't really need to kill any enemies here, but obviously some of them are going to be in the way. And the fastest way to end this map is to just charge straight down the middle hallway and get to the end, and have Symbios arrive at the finish point. However, there is a bat and a Scaven at the very tail end of the map that do block your way. At this point, the bat isn't really too big of a problem anymore. The poison is still annoying, but otherwise they don't pose too much of a threat. The Scaven is one of the new enemies on this map, and they do a lot of damage. Although, I guess to be fair, just about everything does a lot of damage to you on Insane Mode. But the Scaven is a sword-wielding enemy, so under ideal conditions, I think if I had charged Dantaris straight down and have him start attacking the Scaven, I think I probably could have finished this map a turn earlier, but it means I would have to give up on one of the side objectives, which is a chest placed on top of the hill where Dantaris is heading. That chest contains a steel bracer, which increases your defense by 2 points, I believe. Now, as I mentioned in a previous video, Accessories are pretty hard to come by in the early game, so the Steel Bracer is actually going to be pretty useful. And at the very least, I believe it saved me at least one turn on the next map, so it kind of balances out in that sense. So right now I'm just having everybody except for Dontares kind of dogpile towards the end of the map here. Because of the bat that gets into Dontares' way, he actually can't get the chest on a turn earlier than turn 7. So I believe 7 turns is the minimum amount of turns that you need to spend on this map if you want to be able to get the Steel Bracer. Barring if you rig yourself some kind of miraculous critical, which, as mentioned before, critical rates are very, very low if you don't have open triangle advantage. So you might have noticed I left one of the barrels here intact, even though I could have hit it for some extra weapon experience and I guess 5 experience as well. One of the reasons I did that was just because I think I was just being paranoid and I figured that maybe the barrel could block the worm off from hitting Masquerade, but he ended up not being able to reach her anyway. I believe the worm is actually capable of just one-shotting Masquerade, despite the fact that she is actually wearing a silver ring. So that's just a bit of an indicator of how strong the enemies are starting to get in terms of their pure attack power. You might have also noticed that at the beginning portion of this map, Hayward actually managed to reach a 2nd level friendship with Symbios, which I believe is the friend level. This is actually going to be pretty important in the next map, as you'll see. But for now, you can see that Hayward is able to shoot the Scaven for 9 damage, whereas Albright hit it for, I think it was 3 damage. So that just once again shows how big of a difference the friendship bonds can make. But like I said, I'm going to do my best to start using Albright here so that I can get some friendship bonuses with him as well. So warriors like Albright give a defense bonus for their friendship bonus. So this is obviously useful just to get to level 1, just to avoid some of the potential 1-hit KOs you might be facing on Insane Mode. But in my experience, the other thing you can do with it is it also kind of screws with the AI's targeting priority, just because it changes the defense values of whoever they have in range. Obviously, this means that Albright himself will often have the lowest defense if you try to form a defensive line. But since Albright himself has a pretty decent HP and defense growth, he shouldn't have too much trouble even with that. So Grace reaches level 4 here and she learns her 2nd spell, Antidote. It's a pretty big waste of MP in my opinion. You're usually much better off saving her MP to throw out heals because she can heal more HP with her heal spell than she can with medical herbs. And if you want to cure a status element, just use like an antidote herb. So as mentioned, Dontares picks up the Steel Bracer from the chest here, and you're going to see it in action immediately. So that's Battle 4 completed in 7 turns. Let's move on to Battle 5. Battle 5 is the final map of Chapter 1, and it is yet again another route map. This is one of the first kill boss maps where you can actually try to go for that objective without it feeling like you're almost going to find yourself in a situation where you have to wipe out just about everything anyway. It also takes place on a pretty big open map, and the enemies are spread out in kind of an interesting way for you to decide how you want to tackle this map. There's also a new type of side objective on this map, and I think it's considered by some people who play this game casually to be one of the more controversial aspects of the game. But before we get there, we first have to decide which direction we want to go. One option is to just cut through the forest and just try to go straight for the boss, and that'll end the map fairly quickly. But that obviously means that you will miss out on a side objective and the treasures therein. So the other option is to go around the forest, which takes you near the side objective, but also runs the risk of aggroing way more enemies. So you can of course see that I first equipped the Steel Bracer onto Dontares. So even though I'm going to be tanking a magic attack first, and obviously the Steel Bracer doesn't help a lot with that, I am going to be having Dontares baiting a couple other enemies, and the extra defense does help him not get targeted as much. Although alternatively, I think you could have just used a healing herb at one point, depending on how much defense your Dontares gets at this point. So you might remember that I mentioned for the last map that worms are a new enemy type and they're very annoying. And there's one of them near the beginning of this map in the forest. So as mentioned, I'm actually going around the forest and that avoids the worm. Now this worm's AI is basically programmed to inch towards you 1 or 2 blocks at a time, and it doesn't really engage you until someone's within its range. So if you do what I do and you just rush to the side like this, there's a pretty good chance that you can complete the map without ever having to bother with the worm, and you don't have to deal with the random chance of getting paralyzed, and then when you get paralyzed, if you will fail to take an action. So basically, instead of taking the gamble at all, it's better to just ignore the thing and never engage it. So now I guess is a good time for me to kind of talk about the side objective a little bit. So back in the town of Balsamo, we picked up a ruins map, and this is the first ruins that we come across in the game. So entering the ruins lets you access a secondary map, and every single one of them has very good treasure in them, or at the very least they usually have at least one good treasure in them. Some of them are just totally worthless. But if you manage to find the ruins map during your exploration phase and then you find these ruins on the maps, you can access this secondary map and then you can go get the treasure. But for every single one of these ruins, as soon as you open the ruins, a bunch of thieves will spawn and enter the ruins before you. So it does take a little bit of prior planning to be able to get the treasures that you want. So this is why some people don't like this mechanic very much, because the game doesn't explain to you very well how exactly you're supposed to deal with these. You're going to see that when we approach the ruins, I mean, there's going to be a thief that enters it, and then King Benetram basically says, oh, you should send someone to get the treasure before the thieves can. So the game only really gives you the context of what you're supposed to be doing, but they don't exactly explain the mechanics of these dungeons. So in these ruins, the thieves will pretty much always move first. They have a ridiculous amount of agility that I seriously doubt most players are ever going to get, unless they grind until they're like 10 or 15 levels ahead or something. And the thing about the ruins is that when you enter the ruins, it takes up a turn to do so, and the turn for inside the ruins basically starts at the end of each turn outside the ruins. So what this basically means is that you need to know the agility stats of your characters before you even enter one. You want to have the fastest character possible open the ruins, and then everyone slower to them that you want to go in right away. Otherwise, the thieves are going to get multiple turns ahead of you, and there's no way you're going to be able to catch up with them most of the time. And I almost feel like this is the main reason that people don't like it very much, because you kind of have to plan out ahead of time who should open the ruins and who should go in. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get most of the treasures you want, and you're going to need to reset the game. I do agree that if this game came out today, there probably would be a text box or something to explain a little bit better of what you're supposed to do. But I do feel like after the first time you run into one of these, it's not too hard to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. Speaking of which, we can see right now that Masquerade is casting Blaze on the Scaven, and she does get a point of agility from doing so, and she's getting it right on time because, like I said, I want the fastest unit around to be the one opening the ruins. And if Dontaris has a speed tie with Masquerade, Dontaris almost always goes first, and that's not something I want because I want Dontaris to be the one going into the ruins. With this level up, alongside placing Masquerade where I placed her, she's going to be able to move first the next round and open the ruins, and then Dontaris is going to be able to go in immediately and be able to secure the treasure that I want. This, by the way, isn't really a gamble on my part because Masquerade's agility growth is really good. In fact, I think it might even be 100%, or at least it's very close to it. Masquerade very often ends up being one of the fastest members of the force in terms of agility, although obviously her attack and defense growths are pretty bad. One other thing you might have noticed is that during her level up, she also learned new spell, Blaze 2. This is the first AoE spell we get in the game, and it is a very, very useful one. And Masquerade, after using the brain food from the previous exploration segment, has way more MP than she probably will ever need for quite a while. So you've already seen how Masquerade is probably the most consistent unit in this game so far. In terms of damaging just about any unit, I mean, enemy defense growths are kind of out of control, and sometimes they just end up taking 1 damage anyway, but Masquerade always does a solid 10 damage. And now she can do it to up to 5 units at once, which obviously is really broken. Also, sometimes it's worth casting Blaze 2 on a single enemy anyway, just because it's slightly stronger than Blaze 1, so there's that as well. So you can see, like I said, Masquerade moves first on this turn, and you see King Benetram here telling us that you have to go into the ruins to stop the thieves from getting the treasure. One thing I forgot to mention that is probably worth noting is that you actually can't send Zymbios into these ruins. King Benetram will get into your face and you'll be all like, no, you can't go into the ruins, you have to command our army. So that might be another reason why the ruins often end up annoying casual players as well, because Zymbios usually ends up as one of their strongest units, and if you want to take out the thieves easily, Zymbios is a pretty good choice for that. So another thing worth noting about these ruins is the fact that since the thieves are almost always going to move before you, they are almost always going to get the good treasure before you are. So in this situation, the way you make the thieves drop the item is that you basically just have to hit them once. This makes the thief drop the item so you can just stop chasing them. Alternatively, there's actually an exit in each ruins that you can try to block. In some cases this isn't possible, but for this first ruins, for example, the best treasure in it is in the northwest corner of the map. The thief starts in the southwest corner of the map, and your units start on the south end of the map, and the exit is on the east end. So it's actually not that hard to get all the way over to the exit and just block it off. So the way the first ruins is set up, it's actually not set up in a way for you to fail too easily on your first try, unless you just dawdle around for too long and don't listen to Benetram and don't send anybody in. And honestly, failing that, you can save on the map anytime in this game. So it's not even like playing some Fire Emblem games where you want to get certain treasures and the thieves escape the map and you have to restart the whole map, or the game autosaves after each move and you realize at some point that you have moved yourself into a situation where you cannot stop them from escaping anymore. So I think if you're coming into this game from other SRPGs where side objectives like this are common, you'll probably find this to be pretty easy, honestly. But for more casual players and people who do not play too many SRPGs, this can come as a bit of a shock. Although one particular way that you can fail in a very funny way that only casual players can fail, if you decide to grind your units too much, especially Dantaris, who has weapon triangle advantage against any of the thieves. If you accidentally one-shot the thieves while they have the treasure, you can actually miss out on the treasure, and I think that was definitely a design oversight. So if you're the type of player that grinds your characters too much, I guess the best option is to just bring like a crappy weapon to make sure you can't kill the thieves in one hit. So I've been talking a lot about the ruins, and I haven't really talked about the exact treasure we're even trying to get yet. So the northwest chest that the thief will be opening soon, it contains a life ring, which not only gives 4 defense, which is a lot at this point in the game, but it also regenerates 2 HP per turn. So this is obviously a pretty useful item for just about anybody if I want to send them off on their own. Or it's nice just to patch up one of my more frail units so that they don't get one-shot by everything. I mean, 4 defense is obviously a lot. I mean, to put that into perspective, for some units that could be like 6 or 7 levels worth of defense. The other treasure in this first ruins is a healing drop, and I think that kind of speaks for itself. You haven't seen me use any of them yet, but those are like the teardrop shaped healing items that you might have seen in my inventory a couple times. They're just basically a better version of the healing herbs. They recover 30 HP instead of 10 HP, which obviously will be useful later on, but at some point you're going to be able to just buy them, so there's no real point in going out of our way to go get that one right now. So right now we're actually about to bait the boss of the map in. You can see that when he attacks Albright, he's going to do 8 damage to him, even though Albright is standing in a forest which has 30% land effect, and Albright's defense is certainly nothing to shake a stick at. But the nice thing about baiting him in this way is that he is on a weaker land effect, so I can start dogpiling him with everybody. And you can see during these engagement that Hayward gets a special message telling him that he has learned Frozen Arrow. So this is going to be the first special critical attack that we learn in this game. As I mentioned in a previous video, weapons can level up to 3 times, and every time you level up you actually get a new special attack, although for simplicity's sake I'm just going to call them crits. So one of the interesting things about crits in this game is that as soon as you learn one crit, or one special crit, I mean, your base critical hit rate immediately jumps from, I think it was 3% up to 20%. So this means that every time you engage in battle, you have a 1 in 5 of doing a critical attack. So that means if Hayward attacks a flyer as an archer, he gets the other 20% bonus from attacking something he has advantage against, and he will have a almost coin flip chance of getting a critical hit. So now we're going to cut back into ruins because this turn on the outside has just ended. This thief is going to pick up the life ring, as I mentioned he would, and Downtar's is just going to walk up to him and stab him, and he's going to drop the ring in fear. And with the ring in hand, we can finally finish this map. You can see that thanks to the level up earlier, Masquerain does move first in the entire turn. So she outspeeds even as a Dark Mage, and she casts Blaze too, which pretty much does the perfect amount of damage for us to take out the boss. So that's going to be it for map 5. It is completed in 8 turns, and I'll see you in the next one.